Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for having me here today at the Institute of Politics. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come in and talk about a biblical passage. And I was thinking about one that might pertain to politics to some degree, and I ended up settling on this one. But I want to start off with a question today. All of you are interested in politics, probably want to work on Capitol Hill or something in that regard. So I want to start off with a question. When the president plans to go, who gets to know? That is, when a president has plans, when he's moving, when he's shaking, when he's doing things, who gets let in on his plans? You all are probably doing political science majors here, or at least interested in politics because you're in the Institute of Politics. So I imagine that you at some point would like to know his plans, the president plans, the administration's plans. Because if you don't know his plans, that means you are an outsider. Why? Why would you want to know his plans? Well, there's clear benefits of knowing the president's, the most powerful man in the country's plans. If you know what he's doing, you can stay in line with him, keep in step, be aimed at the same direction he is. And given that he's the most powerful man in the country, that will help keep you out of danger, keep you safe, may offer you some incentives and benefits. So there's clear benefits to being in step with the most powerful person of a people, of a nation, of a political body. In our passage today, we read about God's plans as the most powerful person, as the political leader of this body, of this community, of this group of people. And we read about his plans to go from his people. We get let in on who gets to know, why he's changing administrations, but it raises another question. Why is he leaving in the first place? So prior to the passage we're reading today, which is the book of Ezekiel, which is the perspective of a prophet of God, who's just a spokesperson, a kind of lawyer for God, who's speaking at God's people, telling them what they might be doing wrong. But just prior to the book, God has actually judged his people, judged the capital of his city. And he's taken some of them and removed them from the land. And Ezekiel is a part of those people in another land. He's in exile out there, and God gives him this commission as a prophet, tells them, hey, I want you to speak to the people in your local community and the people back at the capital to be like, hey, I'm still in charge here, and I want you in step with my plan. I want you to keep in step so we can do this thing together so there's not conflict in our community, in our political body. And then just prior to the passage we're going to read today, God has taken Ezekiel and shown him in a vision what is going on in the capital. And it's clear that his people, his leaders, his staff there are doing the opposite of what God wants them to do. They're worshiping a different leader, different gods. They are just desecrating the capital there. They're just doing all sorts of bad things. And so what God decides to show Ezekiel, this prophet, one of his staff members per se, is the judgment that he's going to enact on the capital once again. And that is what we are dropped in the middle of in this passage today. We're dropped in the middle of the passage where God is changing his regime. He's getting new leaders. He's getting new people. He's wiping out his old team members, his old political body. He's getting rid of them. And we see that God's plans to leave his people and to start to get a new body, a new community. So we're left with the question again, so who gets to know about God's plans and when he plans to go? The title of my talk today is When God Plans to Go. The main point being is when God plans to go, his servants get to know. And there's 3 points. When God plans to go, we get his servants know to clean up in the first part. In the second part, we see that his servants know to mount up. And in the third part, we see that his servants know to line up. So I'm going to read the text, and while I'm reading it, I want you to just listen for those things. I want you to see, we're going to see some of his servants, and they're these crazy looking creatures, entities, things that are still like his core group that are still with him. And I want you to see what they're doing relative to him. So you have a paper passed out to you with the numbers. So I'll read those and just follow along. Then I looked, and behold, on the expanse that was over the heads of the cherubim, there appeared above them something like a sapphire, in appearance like a throne. And he said to the man clothed in linen, "Go in among the whirling wheels underneath the cherubim, fill your hands with burning coals from between the cherubim, and scatter them over the city." And he went in before my eyes. Now the cherubim were standing on the south side of the house when the man went in, and a cloud filled the inner court. And the glory of the Lord went up from the cherub to the threshold of the house, and the house was filled with the cloud, and the court was filled with the brightness of the glory of the Lord. And the sound of the wings of the cherubim was heard as far as the other outer court, like the voice of God Almighty when he speaks. And when he commanded the man clothed in linen, "Take fire from between the whirling wheels, from between the cherubim," he went in and stood beside a wheel. And a cherub stretched out his hand from between the cherubim to the fire that was between the cherubim, and took some of it, and put it into the hands of the man clothed in linen, who took it and went out. The cherubim appeared to have the form of a human hand under their wings. And I looked, and behold, there were 4 wheels beside the cherubim, one beside each cherub. And the appearance of the wheels was like sparkling beryl. And as for their appearance, the 4 had the same likeness, as if a wheel were within a wheel. When they went in any of their 4 directions without turning as they went. But in whatever direction the front wheel faced, the others followed without turning as they went. And their whole body, their rims and their spokes, their wings, and the wheels were full of eyes all around, the wheels that the 4 of them had. As for the wheels, they were called in my hearing the whirling wheels, and every one had 4 faces. The first face was the face of the cherub, and the second face was a human face, and the third the face of a lion, and the fourth the face of an eagle. And the cherubim mounted up. These were the living creatures that I saw by the Kebar Canal. And when the cherubim went, the wheels went beside them. And when the cherubim lifted up their wings to mount up from the earth, the wheels did not turn from beside them. When they stood still, these stood still. And when they mounted up, these mounted up with them. For the spirit of the living creatures was in them. Then the glory of the Lord went out from the threshold of the house and stood over the cherubim. And the cherubim lifted up their wings and mounted up from the earth before my eyes as they went out, with the wheels beside them. And they stood at the entrance of the east gate of the house of the Lord, and the glory of the God of Israel was over them. These were the living creatures that I saw underneath the God of Israel by the Kebar Canal, and I knew that they were cherubim. Each had 4 faces, and each 4 wings, and underneath their wings the likeness of human hands. And as for the likeness of their faces, they were the same faces whose appearance I had seen by the Kebar Canal. Each one of them went straight forward. There is clearly a lot going on in this passage. You get a lot of description of a lot of weird creatures. But the important thing you need to know is all these are the servants of God. These are all creatures that are supporting him. They are still in his administration, per se. And what we're going to see throughout all this is that they are in step with him. They are doing what he's telling them to do. They are supporting what he's doing. They are let in on his plans. So in the first section, from the numbers 1 to 8, we're going to see God focused on the man in linen, the linen man. God, first of all, tells the linen man about coal. He tells them, hey, go to the cherubim, as we saw described, which was just these angelic, multiple-winged, multiple-faced creatures. He tells the linen man, hey, go to the cherubim and grab some coal. And what God is going to end up telling him to do is to scatter it across the city. It's like, go get the coal from underneath the cherubim, scatter it across the city. So why would he do that? Well, as I mentioned before, we're kind of coming in the middle of a regime change, of a massacre. God has just told some of his other servants to wipe out the people of the city. So what the linen man is doing is going to the coal and scattering it across the city to set it on fire. And God is literally having his new servants, his new body of people around him, to burn the bodies of those around him. He's enacting judgment and destroying the city. So that is what he tells the linen man to do. Maybe you guys have done internships over the summer, and you've kind of understood, you've had to tie up some loose ends when you transition into your new job, into your new role. Perhaps some of the people prior to you didn't do the best job or didn't do a good job. And so you step into it and you're like, oh, there's a lot of stuff I need to clean up, or oh, I need to pick up this mess, and oh, I need to set this straight and this right and set this right. That's pretty much what God is telling the linen man to do. It's like, hey, I'm over this mess. Like, go take the coals, throw them across, clean it up. Like, we're done here. And then we see God make his first move. See, for the nation of Israel, for these people, God's presence was in this chest called an ark. And on the ark were two, what he called cherubs, the very similar creatures, just statue versions of them. And so we see in the text, God moves from the cherub to the threshold. Now, it's not talking about the cherubim, the lively creatures that we're seeing, the living creatures, but these two cherubs on the chest. We see the text says God moved from the cherub of the ark to the threshold of the temple, because that Capitol building, that chest was stored in the middle of the Capitol building. And so we see God makes a slow movement away from where he otherwise has been in the nation of Israel. He goes from the chest, the ark, to the threshold of the house. So we see God start moving out from the Capitol, moving away. That is largely what we see in this first section here in 1-8. And then Ezekiel, the prophet who's witnessing all this stuff, another one of God's servants, the one who's supposed to be speaking these things to these people, then we see his perspective shift, and he observes a new person, a new servant, a new entity in God's new political body. And so we see him start focusing on these wheels and the cherubim, the giant angels themselves. There's really two things you need to note with the wheels. Ezekiel emphasizes and highlights two things. First, they went any of the four directions without turning. So these servants of God had the capability to move to and fro wherever they needed to go with God. And second, the wheels were full of eyes all around. So these were pretty much like the mobilization force, the mobility of God. Again, some of you have probably worked on Capitol Hill, and maybe you guys actually might work in logistics. A good servant is one who knows everything that's going on, and is able to get your leader anywhere they need to go. That's a key part of being a servant who is the one mobilizing your leader, mobilizing the president, or whoever senator, House of Representative you may be working for. If you're a logistics person, it's important that you know what's going on everywhere and that you are able to get them everywhere they need to go. That is pretty much just the role of these wheels. But then in the Numbers 15-17, Ezekiel the prophet starts talking about the cherubim, highlighting them. And in this section here, there's a new verb, a new action that occurs. And it's mount up. In 15, he says, and the cherubim mounted up. And then a little bit later, in 17, when he's talking about the wheels, he says, when they mounted up, these mounted up with them. So he's saying both the cherubim and the wheels mounted up. And he closes 17 with, for the spirit of the living creatures was in them. The spirit is just a way of saying God's spirit is in them. That God is the one in charge of these creatures. So it makes sense that the wheels and the cherubim are in step, that they're mounted up, that they're mounting up together. And that's what Ezekiel is emphasizing. It's just the tight unity of these new servants of God. That when God issues them commands or issues them decrees and gives them plans, they follow it to a T, and they are in unison together. I mean, if you were to go do a summer internship, I imagine you want your coworkers to be in step with him, because if you guys are ever contesting, then it's not a very efficient unit. Um, that's a way that you show that you're better than maybe the previous people who were in that role. You know, you want to be the one doing the most for the person above you, the one who's doing everything right exactly as they say it. And that ensures that you have your job security. Otherwise, what happened to the people prior to you is going to happen to you. So we see that these creatures, these servants of God, the wheels and the cherubim, are in unison doing exactly what God wants them to do because they're embodying God's spirit. They're embodying God's plan. And then God makes his last movement of the passage. So before we saw God go from his original place of presence, his basically his old office, and he was like, I'm done with this office, I'm done with these people. So he goes to the threshold. And then we see him go from the threshold and he mounts up on the cherubim themselves. And so this mobile unit, his team is ready, and he gets on top of the throne on top of them. And then they start moving out to the east gate, which is the direction from where the primary Capitol building would have been. So if you were just walking from God's original presence towards the east gate, it would just be a straight line. And all that's just indicating like God is getting out of there without hesitating, without hesitation. He's just beelining out of there. And we see it says at the end of number 22, each one of them went straight forward. There was no head turning. There was no questioning their jobs, their roles. They were God and these servants with him. They were one and the same, on the same mission, same plan, same intent, same direction. There was no question, no hesitation. Ezekiel is showing that God had decided that it's time for me to depart these people that I was with. I'm bringing my new servants and we're getting out of here. It just shows when God plans to go, his servants know. His servants know that they need to clean up. His servants know that they need to mount up. And his servants know that they need to line up because they're maintaining one and the same direction with God. Shortly after, in the next chapter, we see God continuing out in that direction with his servants. And they end up going to what's in the text is called this mountain on the east side. Shortly after, Ezekiel, the prophet, the one who's seeing this and writing these things, his vision ends. And we just witnessed God's destruction of his people, his wrath upon them, and then him leaving the temple and going on a mountain outside of it. But what's interesting is that later in this book, in chapter 33, Ezekiel would be sitting in his house, and someone would come running 6 years later and tell Ezekiel, Jerusalem just fell. So how are we to make sense of that? Ezekiel saw a vision where Jerusalem had fallen, where Jerusalem was being decimated, this capital. And then 6 years later, someone comes to Ezekiel and telling him, hey, it fell. What this is highlighting is that God showed his prophet, God showed his servants what was going to happen to this capital well before it actually happened. What this is showing is that God's plans were concrete and set in stone before they were actually actualized in reality. So when God plans to go, his servants have the privilege of knowing that he's going well before he actually goes, that he is going to enact judgment upon this place well before the judgment actually occurs. So just like if you were to work with the president, when the president has plans to do something, you have the unique privilege of knowing what's going to happen well before it happens. And it's the same with God. When God plans to go, when God plans to do something, if you're his servant, you have the privilege of knowing something well before it happens. But that leaves us with a question. When God plans to go, who doesn't get to know? Who's left on the outside? Who isn't aware? Who is vulnerable to what God decides to do, to the judgment that God may want to enact in a certain place? 600 years later, God would depart the same temple that we read about God departing in this passage here. 600 years later, God would depart this temple as a man named Jesus. And Jesus had, as God, had new servants with him called new followers that were with him. And as he's walking out of the temple, his servants look up at the temple and just know how beautiful it is. They're just admiring it. They were probably aware of when God left the temple the first time. And Jesus tells them, "Do you see these great buildings? There will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down." Now Jesus would take his followers, his servants, his new servants, and go up from the temple and go up to the eastern mountain that we see shortly after this passage where God is. And Jesus on that mountain will tell his servants his plans for what's about to happen to them, what's about to happen to the temple. And Jesus will then go back into the capital and try to tell everybody his plans of what he wants done. But the ones who don't know the plans are the ones who end up not listening. His servants got to know, but they didn't listen. Instead, they decided to beat him, to persecute him. They decided to crucify him, to kill him. But being God, that wasn't enough. He resurrected, and just like he told his servants, just like he had planned, he ended up ascending and going to heaven in a new office. And his servants were left with these plans that he told them to do. So God, as Jesus, still has plans, still has servants, and his servants get to know his plans. So who did not get to know? Whoever did not listen. Jesus tried to tell everyone his plans. He wants as many servants as he can have. But if you don't listen to him, you're not going to be let in on these plans. 40 years later, after Jesus had told his servants and followers these plans, historian Josephus, ancient historian, would write, "The houses were full of dead women and infants, and the streets filled with dead bodies of old men. And the young men, swollen like dead men's shadows, walked in the marketplace and fell down dead where it happened. And now the multitude of dead bodies was so great that they were alive, could not bury them. And many endeavoring to bury others fell themselves dead upon them. And many being yet alive went unto their graves and there died. Yet for all this calamity was there no weeping nor lamentation. There was no noise heard within the city." 40 years prior, Jesus had taken his servants up to the mountain and told them, one day this temple is going to be brought down. And 40 years later, we have an outsider, someone who didn't listen to Jesus, saying exactly what Jesus said would happen. Jesus was spot on. Just like God had told Ezekiel before Jerusalem's downfall, 6 years before its downfall, Jesus told his servants before 40 years before Jerusalem's downfall that it would be brought down. Now, God, Jesus, is not in the temple. He's not on the mountain. He's in heaven as king, in a new office, and will one day return. When Jesus planned to go, his servants knew that they had a job to clean up themselves, to prepare themselves for his return, and to try to tell other people God's plans, Jesus' plans, and to help them clean up. They knew they had to mount up, that they had an obligation, a responsibility to go out and spread Jesus' plans to everyone and try to get everyone to listen across the whole world. And they mounted up and took that mission from Jerusalem to Samaria to Rome, and as we now have it, into the United States of America. And they had the mission to line up. Jesus left them with the mission to line up, to be in unison, to be in one step, to be united as a church body in this mission. When Jesus planned to go, his servants knew. When Jesus planned to go, those who did not listen did not know. And when Jesus prepares to come from his office now in a new Jerusalem, in a new heavens, when Jesus prepares to come, his judgment will be done. Will you listen to him? Will you serve him? Will you decide to be let in on his plans? Will you listen? Thank you.
Anybody need more time?
If you give me a job at the White House.
Okay.
Okay, between worksheet and writing the sermon, what did you discover about it?
Ezekiel's tough. Ezekiel is tough for unbelievers. Yeah. That's what Yeah. Sorry. For those who don't know Christ. I mean, it's tough preaching. It's tough preaching Ezekiel because the tough part was, given its narrative, I wanted to put them in the shoes of like the people of God in Israel. And it's like, well, I feel like I couldn't do that, so I kind of have to use them as an example. Still did that a little bit. But.
And what encouraged you?
What encouraged me? That doesn't matter where God is; He's in charge.
Good. All right, good.
Yeah, just thinking through, God has not left us in suspense as to what age we're in and what he's doing and what he's going to do. Like, we've got our marching orders.
I appreciate this kind of maybe sounds like too limiting against any type of free will, but like just this idea of like, hey, God empowers his people to be in step with him is like massively encouraging to me because I would not do that.
Good to know God.
What?
I'll say, it's encouraging to know that God calls his shots.
Yeah. It is encouraging that we are not among the outsiders.
Yeah, I was encouraged as you were talking about the benefits of knowing, and thinking through what that means for me, not just knowing the plans, but how when I keep in step, there's safety, so on and so forth. So I appreciated that. So what could you have done better?
Oh boy. I was struggling trying to come up with applications for this passage because it is just describing all these weird creatures. And I'm like, how do I apply this to those who don't know God? And so that's why I was scribbling on this, because I was like, oh, here's some things I can do, hopefully. So I was trying to relate it to like, oh, you've probably done internships in the Capitol. You understand what it's like to work underneath someone with all the power. You know, just like these guys are keeping in step, you probably want to do that too. So that's how I was trying to apply it.
Yes.
So man, I really like the gospel turn. You did emphasize listening to Jesus and then asking that question at the end, will you listen to him?
Yeah.
But I don't think you ever used the word faith once. And you did emphasize part of our job now is to clean ourselves up.
Yeah.
So just with unbelievers, not wanting them to take away like, oh, I got to clean myself up type thing. So like rather than it being
like how
very
does the
clear,
gospel empower us?
So rather than it being very clear that the only way to actually be saved is by grace through faith, like
to listen to him. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Besides listening to him, it was clean yourselves up. And he does say like, believe in me, believe in the one the Father sent.
Yeah.
But just more clarity in terms of calling them to respond in faith.
That makes sense. Connecting, like if you listen to him, you're going to be cleaning yourself.
Or he cleans you up.
Yeah.
The way they're working in relationship together. I thought at certain points it felt like a context dump, and I didn't understand how the context was working in relationship to the argument you're making in the point. For example, there was at one point where you were talking about something you need to know about are these whirling wheels, and I was like, "What? Why do we here? Why do I need to know about this?" So I feel like some of the transitions in and out of the uses of context could be strengthened.
I was at first confused. You were correlating the linen man with like us as summer internships. Like you, I was like, where is he getting this linen man? What is a linen man? Where in the text? Like I'm just trying to think. And then I like read back. I was like, okay, it's verse
man.
2. Like you never gave that reference.
Yeah.
Look back at verse 2 and you'll see this linen man.
This man.
That'd been really helpful to make that connection and show us in the text where you're getting that idea. Because I was like, I don't know what that means.
You've worn linen before.
Even though you read it, I didn't remember that.
That's fair. Yeah, I missed that.
One way I think maybe it would improve, we talked about the cherubim are servants, they're obedient servants, like we would be if we were interning for a leader. One way to take that and improve it is help us see that I thought you were seeding for us, and I didn't hear it come back, but help us see Israel and Judah here. They're people disobedient, so it's understandable. The logical consequence of that is the departure of God, and then setting that on us to make us feel the weight. I don't know. Yeah, I just thought there's some correlation, more correlation there to help us feel the weight of the departure. Yeah, does that make sense?
So first of all, brother, I think this division stinks. It's division of the text.
Okay.
Right? They give you. I don't think it's a good way to divide this text.
How would you do it?
I think the 11 should go with it. It's the way they gave you the text, the way it was assigned to you. I think it was just
Oh, Jeremy's division.
He's not saying.
Yeah,
Oh, I
Jeremy's.
thought you were
Not
talking about my
yours,
break.
no,
Okay,
Jeremy's.
yeah.
I don't know why he did it.
Yeah.
Maybe it was a trap.
I agree. No,
Jeremy's
I was like,
As I read this, what?
Yeah, they do it at work.
Doesn't make sense.
I was wrestling with that entire
It's like a
time.
movie just stops. What? I don't know why he did it.
Okay.
But maybe it was a trap. If it was a trap,
It felt like a trap.
I think he kind of fell into it. I'll explain why.
Yeah.
So you were trying to do two things. So your main point was let's focus on the servants. And then, but in between, you were focusing, I think, on the main thing.
Yeah.
On the movement of God.
Yeah.
And I think because you were conflating those, it was although you said, there's so much happening, and I thought, okay, he will not talk about all this. But it's so much happening, but let me explain what's happening. And you the very end of the chapter. I think if you just simply follow this big steps, he's in the center, he is here, he's at the threshold, then he leaves the threshold, then you can even flip, now he leaves the city. I think it would be just much simpler to understand what's happening.
Yeah, it would have been simpler. I just don't know how it would have filled up because so much of it is just descriptions of the servants and what they're doing too.
Yeah, but what you said, it's so much happening, but let's see what's actually happening. Yeah. And then, I mean, your main point would have been probably different, but maybe it was something like, God won't stay at a dumpster. And then you would explain how precious this dumpster was to the Jews. I mean, like the White House is so precious. But then what is he actually going to do? He's going to light it on fire. He doesn't care about it. And then your connection to the gospel would have been even better. Oh, how great. It's just dumpsters. Yeah. All burn. It's just not what God is about. I think it would have been, the point would have been simpler for us to understand than following the servants.
That's what I was going to get at too. The point of who's the main character.
Oh God.
I think that I don't think I heard in yours. You said it. You said a synonym of it. The text talks about the glory of the Lord. I don't think I've heard you say anything about that. I thought that would have been an easier gospel connection in light of what he was talking about. If you would focus not as much on the cherubim, because all the stuff about the wheels and the eyes, I think actually I'm giving 1.5 right now, but I think that's more apocalyptic than literal, and is standing for something that is related to the glory of the Lord. Which, if you had focused on that tack, on God being the main character in his movement, which it seems like that's what God's plans. It seems like that's where you were going to take the point of view, but it got too complicated.
What I was struggling with is that when you have a passage and there's like a small chunk that's like probably irrelevant, it's toss it out. But what I felt like in that regard, if we're focused on the movement of God, that's like 2 passages. And so I got like 22 passages where it's just like, do I just say like, oh, don't worry about this? There's like these 2 that we care about, or how do I actually, what do I do with all these creatures? That's what I'm trying to.
Well, how do you think the creatures were functioning in a relationship to God? You said they're his staff, his servants.
They're extracting him.
They're extracting him. They're sort of almost like his secret service type of thing. Which is fine. But where's he going and why? Is the bigger point. I think. And I think it would have been helpful to sort of wrestle with that part of the text more than the cherubim. Because this is, again, back to Aman's point about traps people fall in. What do we say about apocalyptic poetry or prophecy? It's sometimes the main point is just a simple thing, and they give a whole lot of examples, a whole lot of imagery to buttress that. Just can't afford to get bogged down in the imagery to the neglect of the main thing that they're actually trying to accomplish. I think that would have been helpful if you wrestled with the point of view that, okay, this is about God and his movement, and what about that, and what about that with the what about that is confronting or connecting to the unbeliever. Let's hit another round. We got another one.
Yes, something I think you could do to make that temple run even stronger, because I liked it. You mentioned like Ezekiel is told by God, hey, this is going to happen 6 years ahead of time, and it happens. And so like as unbelievers, we're like, oh, like this God that he is proclaiming like knows what's going to happen before it happens. And then you did the 600 years to Jesus. I think if you would have just mentioned that same temple that had been destroyed 6 years after Ezekiel had now been rebuilt, and that Jesus is now standing on that, saying it's going to be destroyed, what was missing was the rebuild. And just the continuity of, hey, this is the same temple that essentially man tried to rebuild, and Jesus is going to say, hey, 40 years from now, it's going down too. So just to amplify what you were doing.
That's good.
Yeah, this is just a suggestion because I don't know. I feel like if for application purposes, if the focus then shifts to God, then these become maybe helpful lenses for application, or something like that. Like focusing on these servants in the way, if explaining only takes like a couple seconds, if it's really only a thing, right? Then you have more time to talk about how the gospel empowers, that kind of servant relationship, or like, staying in step with the Lord, all the implications of that. And so that's just a suggestion. That's probably just for this sermon.
You said your movements very clearly up front, and then as you were going through, like, I was kind of lost where you were at in your sermon. And I did hear you repeat. So like the one I definitely got was mount up, but I understood how cleans up like tied into it entirely.
You called it the linen man. You didn't say clean up in the beginning.
Oh, okay.
So it seemed like your first move was titled Linen Man.
Yeah.
Something like that.
It's pretty dope.
I was like, this is sick, but that's not what you said your structure was.
So, yeah, that was my area of feedback. Cleaning the movements up into it. Because if you're that clear up front, maybe it'll still be helpful. I'll be like, and now we're going to talk about how God cleans up through his linen man.
I need to clean up and line up.
Cleaned up to the linen man.
Yeah.
The bounty man.
Me as the linen man needs to clean up the
Mr.
line of
Clean.
my points.
Your introduction didn't set tension for me well enough to understand. Like, I understand you're trying to help draw the connection for the crowd, president, who gets to know when he moves. But I didn't know necessarily, like, why do I want to know when he moves? Why is that information so important for me to know? Unless I'm like a terrorist in the crowd, like, I don't care to some degree. Yeah. So trying to help me understand the stakes in not knowing would have helped improve that introduction.
Okay.
Yeah, it was also, I'm gonna comment on the intro and the tension. So I think because you gave out all the answers from the context, or main answers, that released all the tension for the body of the text. Which I think you were thinking about the audience. They don't understand anything, so they need to know all these things. But maybe even if you kept the main point about the servants, maybe you could have make it very short, just saying, imagine you're working for the president, and then you don't get any memos. So, oh, he's just, what's happening? Would you be worried? Yeah. And then just leave it like that. Would you be worried? Let's look at this. What's happening here? And then you slowly give some clues from the context, but not all at once, but slowly. Why are they leaving? Because the whole city is rebelling against him. They don't care about the president. They hate him. And then you slowly, do you understand why you were in the dark? Because you hate president as well. You've been undermining him, whether you knew it or not. That's why you're no longer you're done. But still.
No, that's good. I was wrestling with that, like how to build and then maintain the tension. So that's good. Yeah.
So the only other thing I would say, you mentioned, I don't think you made clear enough, you mentioned judgment several times, but you never like clearly, okay, pretty much what Armand was just saying, like why, or what is the actual judgment? Because the word judgment is not mentioned in the text. You said it a few times, and the judgment is the leaving. But I think the sermon would have been helped if you would somehow or other tied in what the actual glory of the Lord leaving would have meant to them, and how is there some kind of equivalent of when somebody actually, power leaves a place and how that impacts those who are left there. Something along those lines to help with the idea of judgment, because it's almost felt like it got thrown in there, but I'm like, okay, now how are you relating to that? But enough of that, what did you do well?
I guess I'm content with how I did given the passage.
Okay.
It was tough, so I was like, I'll take it. You know? They could have.
Ezekiel weird, man. This is not easy work.
No.
Yeah, dude, I was gonna say, every time I hear you preach, like the calm confidence that you have, it's better and better. You're easy to listen to, and even the main thing was the hand motions. Like, it's all in proportion to like your demeanor, and it works. Like you're like, but you're like talking, and just proper animation, and was encouraged.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I think the way that you used the literary context, like temporally, future stuff, like this is going to happen 6 years in the future, in relationship to your main point, which was that his servants get to know. I was like, oh, that is a very clear, helpful use of the context that is driving forward your argument. So it was good.
Your gospel connection, when you walked it back through your movements, that was a really good impulse, and I thought that worked. So that was well done.
You closed pressing a question on the audience, trying to evoke response, not trying to leave us yeah, you're leaving us with something to go into. Will we or will we not? So,
Brother, I think you've been consciously working on choosing a good controlling image in your past one. I think this one was probably, I think, was the strongest. Worked well. It helped me as a believer, as a student of this text, to understand the text better. Oh yes, president leaving people in the dark, but doing something before leaving the White House, setting it on fire. Oh yes, it just helped me understand the movements. So I think it was masterfully chosen.
Yeah, I want to double down on that. I thought that it was clean and clear. You stuck with it. And you argued with it well. And it wasn't just artful, it was helpful in terms of the understanding of what was going on in the text and making it tangible. So I thought you did a really good job of setting up the whole thing, even the whole language, the bones of it. I mean, you could have done it differently or whatever, but you came back to what you did have, particularly at the end and even at the beginning. You talked about the benefits of knowing why, and then sort of hinted at that again, the gospel connection and coming back around. I thought that was really well done, really structurally sound. Let's hit one more bit.
Yeah, the ultimate application for unbelievers would be the call to trust Jesus. And your last question that you ended on, will you listen? I mean, it was like a palpable tension, like a mic drop moment type thing. So I thought that was really good.
I appreciated that in your controlling image, like planning to go, cleans up, mounts up, lines up, and then the way you were using it in your application, like with politics, president, and stuff like that. Something that came through was this communication of like God's superiority, which is like very explicit in this text with like all the images and stuff like that. But you didn't have to explain them. It was also coming through in your controlling image, which was, I thought was pretty cool.
Your main point was really clear. You stated it numerous times, and one thing it said even before you preached, and it's like, this man's a preacher. When God plans to go, his servants know. That's orally very pleasing.
Come on!
I felt like I told and I was like, this man's a preacher. Like your homiletics have gotten they've gotten improved so much.
There's just not enough R's.
Or P's.
Yeah, or P's.
You got 3 ups. Even though this isn't chapter 1.
When you preached at our Cancun resort, I was wondering, I was wanting you to turn the intro on us, and I know I dug you just a minute ago for the intro, but you did ask us who gets to know God's plans. I saw a more deliberate effort this sermon as compared to the last one to try to turn it on us, and especially with the image relating it to us. So,
I liked the connection to the gospel. I think it was, I didn't even think of it, and when you said, well, Jesus did the same thing, just explain to the disciples, I don't care about this. This is an abomination what's happening here. It's going to be all gone. I think it was a great text to, and if you re-preach this text to, in Christian context, you can ask them, do you think the church learned the lesson? Think about the church history. Once Christianity was legalized, built huge temples. Oh, your soul will be saved if you give this money, so we build this cathedral. And they keep doing. Yeah. Oh, you think Protestants are better? Or how many hundreds of millions do they spend on the embellishments? What if the glory of God left? Will they even change anything in their minute by minute liturgy?
Wow.
Think about it.
Right.
But this was great. This connection was strong.
Yeah, I appreciated it too. You did it all the way through. You let biblical context as well as cultural understanding help the sermon. Just made it very clear. And I agree too. I hadn't thought of that gospel connection, but once you did it, it's like, of course, that's exactly right. And I see where you got that from, and It's right on point and it's helpful, particularly for a non-believer to sort of get at what the significance of Jesus in relationship to the temple, that type of thing. There's ways that you could have did the application after that a little bit differently, whatever, but I thought it was really solid and sound. Really good instincts. And I've seen just great progress since the last time you preached. That was a good job.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Well done, brother.
Good work.
No more Ezekiel.
Is that it? Oh, you preached them both back to
Yeah.
back real quick.
Done.
Bam.